The sky above the imperial capital of Illyria Prime was a bruised violet, a color usually reserved for the robes of high priests. But today it was stained with the greasy black smoke of a dying engine. Elias Vance fought the flight yoke of his diplomatic courier vessel with both hands. The atmospheric stabilizers were screaming a mechanical death knell. He had been cleared for a standard descent into the Unity spaceport just 3 minutes ago. Then came the sudden energy spike, the localized EMP burst that felt less like a malfunction and more like a sniper shot to the ship's nervous system. Hold together, Elias thought. Just hold together until the retro thrusters fire. They did not fire. The ship was a falling brick of durasteel and ceramic composite. Below him, the sprawling metropolis of glass spires and floating platforms rushed up to meet him. He wrenched the manual override, forcing the flaps to deploy. The vessel shrieked, banking hard away from a populated transit lane and toward a massive shimmering ring that orbited the upper citadel. It was the Halo Conservatory, a restricted orbital garden suspended by gravity tethers. The impact was not the fiery explosion he expected, but a chaotic crunch of shattering crystal and snapping vegetation. The ship sheared through the translucent dome, plowing into a dense forest of bioluminescent ferns. Safety foam flooded the cockpit, pinning Elias against his seat as the world went dark. When he woke, the air smelled of ozone and crushed sugar. The foam had dissolved into a sticky residue. Elias unbuckled his harness and kicked the emergency hatch open. He stumbled out onto a bed of moss that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic blue light. His ship was a ruin, half buried in the alien soil. He checked his pockets. The diplomatic pouch was intact. That was the only thing that mattered. He was a courier, and the data shard in his jacket pocket contained preliminary treaty protocols for the upcoming Unity Summit. He heard the hum of an engine, but it was too quiet to be a security drone. Elias ducked behind the smoking fuselage of his ship. A small, sleek, personal hover skiff descended through the hole he had punched in the dome. It landed silently on the moss. A figure stepped out. She was tall, wearing the stiff, high-collared ceremonial dress of the Illyrian court, woven from thread that looked like liquid silver. Her skin was a pale, iridescent lilac, and her eyes were solid gold, lacking pupils but sharp with intelligence. This was not security. This was royalty. Elias recognized her from the briefing packets. Princess Seraphine, the niece of the regent, the face on every propaganda poster from here to the outer rim. She walked toward the wreckage, her boots leaving no impression on the moss. She stopped 10 feet from where Elias was hiding and crossed her arms. "You can come out," she said. Her voice was melodic but carried a distinct edge of boredom. "If you were an assassin, you would have used a stealth insertion pod, not a flying brick. And if you were a generic invasion force, there would be more of you." Elias hesitated, then stepped out from behind the twisted metal. He held his hands up, showing them empty. "I am Elias Vance, diplomatic courier for the Terran Coalition," he said. "My ship suffered a catastrophic failure on approach. I apologize for the damage to your garden." Seraphine looked at the shattered dome above, then back at him. She tilted her head, studying his dusty flight suit and the cut on his forehead. "You destroyed a grove of singing orchids that has been growing for 300 years, she said. "The royal botanist will likely demand your head on a pike." Elias lowered his hands slowly. "It was an accident. My systems were sabotaged." Sabotaged. Her golden eyes narrowed. "That is a heavy word, Mr. Vance." Before he could answer, the distant wail of sirens pierced the quiet of the garden. Red lights began to flash on the perimeter of the halo. "Palace security," Elias said, tensing. I need to declare diplomatic immunity. Seraphine laughed, a short, sharp sound. Immunity? You just crash-landed an unsanctioned vessel into the private sanctuary of the imperial family during a high-alert period 2 weeks before the Unity Summit. Security drones are programmed to vaporize threats first and file reports later. She looked at him. Really looked at him, calculating the variables. Then she sighed and gestured to her skiff. Get in. Elias blinked. Excuse me? If they find you here, the Regent will bury you in a detention cell and claim you were an insurgent, she said, walking back to her vehicle. My reputation can survive a scandal, Mr. Vance. But I simply do not have the patience for the paperwork avalanche that comes with a dead diplomat. Get in the skiff. Now. Elias did not argue. He sprinted to the vehicle and slid into the passenger seat. Seraphine jumped in beside him and punched the throttle. The skiff shot forward, diving into the dense foliage just as a squad of black armored enforcement drones descended through the breach. She flew with terrifying precision, weaving between massive tree trunks and ducking under hanging vines that sparked with electricity. Keep your head down, she ordered. We are taking the service tunnels back to the residential spire. Why are you helping me? Elias asked, gripping the dashboard. Because, she said, banking hard to the left. Nothing crashes in this sector by accident. If someone shot you down, they did it to stop whatever is in your pocket from reaching the council. And I hate being kept out of the loop. The ride was a blur of motion and near misses. They docked in a private hangar deep within the palace infrastructure. Seraphine hurried him out of the skiff and into a service lift. They ascended 50 floors in silence before the doors opened into a lavish suite that smelled of jasmine and cold stone. This is my private wing, she said. The surveillance here is strictly internal. Wait here. Do not touch anything valuable. She vanished into an adjoining room. Elias stood in the center of the lounge, heart hammering against his ribs. He moved to the window. The view was staggering. Illyria Prime was a jewel of a world, a testament to a civilization that had mastered gravity and light. But beneath the beauty, he could feel the tension. The city was too quiet. The patrols were too frequent. Seraphine returned a moment later. She was holding a data pad and tapping furiously on the screen. I have accessed the traffic control logs, she said without looking up. Your flight path data was erased 3 seconds after impact. That confirms the sabotage. Someone wanted you to disappear. Elias turned from the window. The Regent. She stopped tapping. My uncle is a man of order. He believes the Unity Summit is the final step in securing Illyrian dominance over the sector. A dead human diplomat would cause chaos, which he hates. Unless he plans to use that chaos to justify martial law. She looked at Elias, her expression unreadable. What are you carrying? Standard treaty revisions, Elias said. Trade tariffs, border dispute protocols, nothing worth killing for. Unless the killing is the point, Seraphine mused. She walked over to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water, handing one to him. You cannot leave, she stated. The moment you step out of my quarters, the Regent's grid will flag your biosignature. You are officially missing and presumed dead. We need to keep it that way until I can figure out who pulled the trigger on your ship. So I am a prisoner? You are a guest, she corrected. A very secret, very illegal guest. But you cannot stay here doing nothing. The court is a nest of vipers, and they notice when I hide things. I need a cover for you. She looked him up and down, squinting slightly. We will say you are a cultural consultant, she decided, hired privately by me to prepare for the human delegation's arrival. It explains why you are human, why you are with me, and why you have no official clearance. Will they believe that? Elias asked. They will believe that I am eccentric and impulsive, Seraphine said. That is the brand I have cultivated for 20 years. It makes them underestimate me. She took a sip of her water. But first, we need to get you out of that flight suit. You look like you rolled through a compost heap. She led him to a large dressing chamber. Mirrors lined every wall, reflecting the infinite complexity of the palace life he had just crashed into. I have some oversized ceremonial robes that might fit you until we can fabricate something else, she said, opening a wardrobe. Elias watched her. He realized suddenly that she was still wearing her own armor, the stiff silver thread gown that looked heavy enough to stop a laser blast. She moved with a practiced grace, but he could see the strain in her shoulders. Do you need help? He asked, gesturing vaguely to the complex array of clasps running down the back of her armor. Seraphine froze. She looked at him in the mirror. The air in the room shifted, thickening with a sudden, sharp tension. In Illyrian culture, touching the royal armor was strictly forbidden for commoners, let alone aliens. She turned slowly to face him. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for disrespect, for hunger, for anything other than genuine offer of assistance. She found only simple, practical concern. It is heavy, she admitted softly. The ceremonial plating is lined with lead and gold. It is meant to remind us of the weight of rule. She turned her back to him, sweeping her hair aside to reveal the nape of her neck. The interlocking plates of the dress were held together by a series of intricate magnetic latches. The top one, she directed. It requires a dual pressure release. Elias stepped closer. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. He reached out, his fingers hovering for a second before making contact with the cool metal of the dress. He found the mechanism she described. Ready? He asked. Yes. He pressed the release. The clasp hissed and clicked open. The heavy collar of the dress loosened, sliding down her shoulders slightly. Seraphine let out a long breath, her posture relaxing instantly. Better? Elias asked, stepping back to give her space. Much, she murmured. She looked at him over her shoulder, a daring, playful half-smile touching her lips. It was a mask, he realized, a defense mechanism she used to keep people off balance. She caught his eye in the mirror. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming a smoky whisper that vibrated in the quiet room. That was just the first layer. Mr. Vance, want to see more? Unclasp it. The words hung in the air, charged and electric. It was a provocation, a test. She was watching his reaction closely. If he leered, if he made a move, she would know he was just another man consuming her image. Elias held her gaze in the mirror. He did not step forward. He did not smile. He kept his hands clasped behind his back. I think you are capable of handling the rest, Your Highness, Elias said evenly. I am here to help you survive a conspiracy, not to complicate your life. Seraphine stared at him for 3 seconds. Then, the playful mask dissolved, replaced by a look of genuine surprise and sudden, deep respect. She nodded once. Thank you. Elias, she said, her voice returning to its normal, commanding tone. You passed. Passed what? The idiot test, she said. Most diplomats would have tried to charm me. Most soldiers would have been too terrified to speak. You just treated me like a person who needed to change her clothes. She pointed to a side door. Go in there. You will find a robe. I will be out in 5 minutes. Elias went into the side room. He leaned against the door, exhaling a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He had the distinct feeling that he was walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. While Elias changed, Seraphine finished removing her armor. She stood in her undersuit, a lightweight, flexible mesh. She felt lighter, but her mind was racing. Elias Vance was an anomaly. He was calm in a crisis. He did not fawn over her title. And he respected boundaries she hadn't even explicitly set. She liked him. That was dangerous. She pulled on a simple travel tunic and trousers, the kind of clothes she wore when she snuck out to the lower markets. As she fastened her belt, a small, floating orb drifted into the room. It was her personal assistant drone, a unit she called Chatter Princess. Chatter chirped. "I have detected a linguistic anomaly in the previous audio buffer." "Delete it," Seraphine said. "Processing," Chatter replied. "Uploading to local archive for syntax analysis." Error. Upload redirected to public palace subnet due to security override on internal servers. Seraphine froze. "What did you just say?" "Packet sent. Title: Royal Discourse Sample 1. No." Seraphine lunged for the drone, but it was too late. The data packet had already pinged the local network. Within an hour, the phrase "want to see more." Unclasp it had been downloaded 40,000 times. The context was missing. The video was missing. It was just the audio file of the Princess of the Empire whispering a line that sounded scandalously seductive. By the time Elias and Seraphine regrouped in the main lounge, the damage was done. Seraphine was pacing, watching a holographic feed of the palace social grid. "This is a disaster," she groaned. "Look at this. They are remixing it into dance tracks. They are printing it on synth shirts." Elias looked at the feed. The youth of Illyria were going wild. For years, Seraphine had been the untouchable, perfect porcelain doll of the court. Now, suddenly, she sounded human. She sounded messy. She sounded like she had a secret life. "It is polling at 90% approval among the under 30 demographic," Elias noted, reading the scrolling data. "They think you are rebelling against the strict moral codes of the regent." "I am not rebelling," Seraphine snapped. "I was changing my shirt." The door chime rang. It was a heavy, authoritative sound. "Hide!" Seraphine hissed. Elias ducked behind a tapestry just as the doors slid open. The regent stood there. He was a massive figure, draped in robes of black and gold. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Uncle," Seraphine said, composing herself instantly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" The regent did not step inside. He stood on the threshold, flanked by 2 royal guards. "You are careless, Seraphine," he rumbled. "This audio leak, it is undignified. It makes the royal family look like common entertainers." "It was a translation error." Seraphine lied smoothly. "A glitch in my language tutor drone." The regent stared at her. He did not believe her. "There are rumors," he said. "Rumors of a crash in the Halo Conservatory. Rumors that you were seen near the wreckage." "I was inspecting the damage," Seraphine said. "I am the patron of the gardens, after all." The regent stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "There is an internal threat. Seraphine, enemies who wish to sabotage the Unity Summit. I am doubling your guard. You are confined to the palace until the delegates arrive. For your own safety." He turned and marched away. The doors sealing shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the room. Seraphine stood motionless until she was sure he was gone. Then she sagged against the wall. "He knows," she whispered, "or he suspects. He is tightening the net." Elias stepped out from behind the tapestry. "Confined to the palace? That complicates things." "It ends things," Seraphine said. "If I cannot move, I cannot find out what he is planning." She looked at Elias, her eyes hardening. "Unless we stop playing by his rules." She went to a bookshelf and pulled on a decorative bust of an ancient philosopher. The shelf clicked and swung open. revealing a hidden alcove. Inside, a glowing sphere of hard light hovered in the air. It was a star map, but not a modern one. The constellations were shifted, depicting the galaxy as it looked 1,000 years ago. "What is this?" Elias asked, stepping into the alcove. "The Imperial Vault," Seraphine said. "The history they do not teach in schools." She spun the globe. It zoomed in on a sector of space that was currently marked as a hazardous waste zone. "My uncle wants the Unity Summit to be a success," she said. "But peace is hard. Peace is messy. It requires compromise. My uncle does not like compromise." She tapped a specific coordinate on the ancient map. Centuries ago, the First Empire built a device, the Nemospire. It was a psychic amplifier designed to stabilize societies. It could broadcast emotions, calm, loyalty, contentment, mind control, Elias said, a chill running down his spine. "They called it harmonization," Seraphine corrected. "They realized it was monstrous and sealed it away. They erased it from the maps. But look at this." She overlaid a modern supply manifest onto the ancient map. A red line traced a path from the capital to the exact coordinates of the sealed spire. "Mining equipment," Seraphine read. "Excavation teams, dispatched by the Regent's private office 6 months ago." "He is digging it up," Elias realized. "He does not want a treaty. He wants to turn the delegates into puppets. If he activates that thing at the summit, he will enslave half the galaxy without firing a shot." Seraphine finished. She looked at Elias. The humor was gone from her face. The mask was down. She looked terrified, but beneath the fear, there was a steel core of resolve. "We cannot stay here," she said. "I have a contact in the floating market city of Kairos, a smuggler. If anyone can get us to that dig site, it is her." "But you are confined," Elias said. "The guards are doubled." Seraphine looked at the wardrobe where her armor still lay in a heap. Then she looked at the service vent in the ceiling. "Then we will have to leave the royal way," she said, a spark of her old mischief returning. "Which is?" "Through the trash chutes, disguised as laundry," she said. Elias looked at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "You are serious," he said. "Deadly." She replied. She extended a hand to him. "This is treason, Elias. If we leave, there is no going back. You lose your title. I lose my career. We become fugitives." Elias looked at her hand. He thought about the crash. He thought about the Regent's cold eyes. He thought about the look on Seraphine's face when he had unclasped her armor. The look of someone who had been waiting a lifetime for someone to just help her breathe. He took her hand. "Led the way. Princess," he said. Seraphine gripped his hand tight. "Call me Seraphine," she said. "And Elias?" "Yes?" "If we survive the trash chute, do not mention the smell." "Deal." They turned toward the service hatch, leaving the safety of the palace behind, stepping into the dark unknown of a revolution that had just begun. The door to the hidden vault hummed softly, the ancient star map spinning in the dark, marking the destination that would change everything. The game was on. The transition from the pristine, scented air of the royal quarters to the recycling infrastructure of the palace was abrupt and violent. They slid down a frictionless chute designed for linens, tumbling into a massive collection bin filled with synthetic silk and velvet. Elias scrambled out of the pile, helping Seraphine to her feet. They were in a loading bay. Huge automated haulers were moving crates of waste toward the outbound shuttles. "We need to blend in," Seraphine whispered. She grabbed a pair of gray worker coveralls from a hook on the wall and threw one to Elias. "Put this on." As he pulled the rough fabric over his courier uniform, He watched her. She was shedding the last trappings of her royalty. She pulled her hair back into a severe knot and smeared a smudge of grease across her cheek to hide the iridescent sheen of her skin. She looked different, less like a statue, more like a survivor. "Where is this contact of yours?" Elias asked, fastening the front of his coveralls. "Kairos is 3 sectors away," Seraphine said. "We need to stow away on a supply drone." She led him through the shadows of the loading bay, dodging the sensors of the security bots. They found a drone marked for bio-waste disposal heading for the outer rim. "Romantic," Elias muttered. "Practical," Seraphine countered. "Nobody scans the bio-waste." They wedged themselves into the small crawl space behind the drone's cargo container. It was cramped. Elias was pressed against the metal wall, and Seraphine was pressed against him. There was no space for awkwardness. Her shoulder was jammed under his arm, her hip against his thigh. The drone's engines fired. The vibration rattled their teeth. "Ready?" Seraphine asked, her voice close to his ear. "Ready?" Elias said. The drone lifted off, punching through the atmospheric shield and accelerating into the void through the small viewport. Elias watched Illyria Prime shrink away. The beautiful, terrifying garden where he had crashed was gone. Ahead lay the darkness of space, the promise of danger, and the only person in the galaxy who knew the truth. He looked down at Seraphine. She was watching the stars, her eyes reflecting the infinite black. She didn't look back at the palace. She only looked forward. Elias realized then that the crash hadn't just broken his ship. It had broken the cage she had been living in. And now that she was out, she was going to burn the whole corrupt system to the ground, and he was going to help her strike the match. The air in the cargo hold of the drone smelled of ozone and rotting biological matter. When the maglocks disengaged, the floor simply dropped away. Elias Vance and Princess Seraphine tumbled out into freefall, landing hard on a mesh safety net suspended beneath the docking bay of Kairos. Kairos was not a planet. It was a chaotic accretion of metal, neon, and gravity anchors floating in the dense orange atmosphere of a gas giant. It was the drain pipe of the sector, where stolen goods and forgotten people washed up. The city was a vertical labyrinth of suspended platforms, connected by rusted cables and flickering energy bridges. Elias groaned, rolling onto his back. The net swayed dizzyingly over a drop that stretched down for miles into the crushing depths of the gas giant below. "Welcome to the free market." Seraphine coughed, wiping sludge from her shoulder. Her disguise was already in place. The shimmering silver of her royal armor was gone, replaced by the heavy ornate robes of a textile merchant from the outer rim. She had used a dermal shader to dull the iridescent lilac of her skin to a dusty gray, and contact lenses hid her distinctive golden eyes behind a muddy brown. Elias adjusted his own collar. He was dressed in the drab functional tunic of a bonded clerk. "We need to move," Elias said, checking the chrono on his wrist. "The bio-waste cycle flushes these nets every 20 minutes. They scrambled across the swaying mesh, climbing a maintenance ladder up to the lowest level of the commercial district. The noise hit them instantly. It was a physical wall of sound, shouting vendors, grinding gears, the thrum of hover engines, and the blare of unauthorized music. "Keep your head down," Seraphine murmured, adopting the haughty, bored posture of a wealthy trader. "You are my accounts manager. If anyone asks, we are here to source hyper silk for the weaving guilds." They merged into the crowd. The population of Kairos was a dizzying array of species. There were hulking, four-armed dock workers, cybernetically enhanced brokers with ticker tape eyes, and small, scurrying scavengers that moved through the vents. Elias felt the familiar itch of paranoia between his shoulder blades. In the capital, the danger had been sterile and silent. Here, it was loud and dirty. Every shadow looked like a knife. Our contact is in the Rust District, Seraphine said, navigating the crush with surprising ease. Sector 9. They boarded a sky tram, a rusted metal box suspended on a magnetic rail that spiraled up through the city's layers. The tram was packed. Elias stood protectively behind Seraphine, his hand resting near the hidden stun baton in his belt. 2 rows ahead, a pair of reptilian enforcers were scanning faces with a retinal wand. Elias stiffened. "Relax," Seraphine whispered, not turning her head. "You are projecting tension. A clerk is bored, not ready for combat. Slouch a little." Elias forced his shoulders to drop. He looked out the scratched viewport. The city was a mesmerizing wreck. Holographic advertisements for illegal gene mods and cheap whiskey floated in the smog, casting garish pink and green light over the rusted architecture. The tram lurched to a halt at Sector 9. They stepped out onto a platform that smelled of burning oil and spicy street food. "The contact's name is Nyx," Seraphine said. "She runs a salvage yard near the turbine intake. They found the yard at the end of a blind alley. It was a cavernous space carved out of a decommissioned hull plating factory. Piles of scrap metal formed jagged mountains, and sparks showered down from a suspended walkway where a welder was at work. "Hey," Seraphine shouted over the roar of industrial fans. "We are looking for the engineer who fixed the propulsion drive on the layout Starlight Runner." The welding stopped. The figure on the walkway pushed up their mask, revealing a face smeared with grease and framed by chaotic violet hair. She was a Tavari, a species known for their dexterity and engineering prowess. She slid down a cable, landing in front of them with a heavy metallic thud. Her legs, Elias noticed, were cybernetic replacements, sleek, hydraulic constructs built for speed and strength. The Starlight Runner was a flying coffin, the engineer said. Her voice was scratchy and dry. "I didn't fix it. I resurrected it. Who is asking?" "Friends of the pilot," Seraphine said. "We heard you deal in rare parts." Nyx wiped her hands on a rag. "I deal in scrap. If you want rare, go to the upper levels. If you want cheap, keep walking." Seraphine stepped forward, dropping the merchant accent. "We need information. Nyx, about a specific shipment of archaeotech." Nyx narrowed her eyes. She looked from Seraphine to Elias, analyzing them. Then she snorted. "You are not merchants. You walk like soldiers, but you dress like actors. And you," she pointed a wrench at Seraphine, "you have the posture of someone who has never had to duck through a blast door." "I am learning," Seraphine said dryly. Nyx grinned, revealing sharp serrated teeth. "I like learners. They pay better because they are desperate. Come to the back." She led them into a cramped office made from the cockpit of a crashed fighter. It was cluttered with data spikes and empty ration packs. Nyx kicked a chair toward Elias and leaned against a console. "What are you looking for?" "Nemo circuitry," Elias said. "Crystalline matrix cores. Old tech." Nyx whistled low. "That is not just old. That is banned. Imperial Grade A contraband. If the Regent catches you asking about that, he won't arrest you. He will just erase you." "We know the risks," Seraphine said. "Have you seen it?" Nyx tapped a few keys on her console. A holographic list projected into the air. It was a manifest from a black market auction house known as the Obsidian Gavel. Item 402. Nyx read, "Pre-unification cognitive resonance shards. Origin, restricted excavation site." "It is real." Seraphine breathed, her face pale beneath the gray dye. "He is selling the excess." "No," Elias corrected, studying the list. "He is not selling it. He is buying it." Look at the buyer codes. These are dummy corporations registered to the Imperial Treasury. He is trying to reacquire fragments that were looted centuries ago. He needs the whole set to make the spire work. Nix looked at them sharply. You two are mixed up in something heavy, the kind of heavy that sinks ships. We are trying to stop a war, Elias said. Nix laughed. Everyone is trying to stop a war. Honey, usually by starting a bigger one. Suddenly, a proximity alarm blared on Nix's console. Red lights flashed across the scrapyard. Company, Nix hissed. Imperial Seekers. They must have tracked your biosignatures when you got off the tram. Seraphine looked at the monitor. 3 armored figures were moving through the scrap piles, scanning with thermal optics. Is there a back door? Elias asked, drawing his stun baton. Nix grabbed a heavy magnetic wrench. This is a salvage yard. There are 40 ways out, but only 3 that won't kill you. Follow me. They sprinted through the labyrinth of junk. The Seekers opened fire, plasma bolts searing the air and melting holes in the scrap metal. Elias shoved Seraphine behind a stack of engine casings as a bolt slagged the wall next to his head. Go! He shouted, providing covering fire with a salvaged blaster Nix tossed him. They burst out onto a service catwalk suspended over the street. The wind whipped at their clothes. Below, the traffic of Kairos flowed like a river of light. The tram, Nix yelled, pointing to a cargo rail running parallel to the catwalk. A heavy ore hauler was thundering past. Jump, Seraphine commanded. She didn't hesitate. She vaulted the railing, landing hard on the roof of the moving tram. Elias followed, his boots skidding on the slick metal. Nix landed last, her hydraulic legs absorbing the impact with a hiss of pistons. The Seekers appeared on the catwalk behind them. They raised sniper rifles. Get down! Elias roared, tackling Seraphine. A laser shot scorched the air where she had been standing. They lay flat on the roof of the speeding tram as it careened through the neon canyons of the city. The wind roared in their ears. Nice tackle, Seraphine shouted over the noise. Very heroic. I prefer effective, Elias shouted back. They rode the tram until it dipped into the lower industrial sector, losing the pursuers in the smog. Nix guided them to a safe house she maintained in the sub-basement of a water filtration plant. The room was tiny. It was essentially a storage closet with a single mattress, a water purifier, and a flickering light strip. The air was humid and smelled of chlorine. Home sweet hellhole, Nix said, keying the lock. I need to go secure a transport. If those Seekers are here, the spaceport is burned. I have a friend with a stealth runner, but it will cost you. Bill it to the Imperial Crown, Seraphine said, leaning against the wall, exhausted. Nix laughed. I will put it on your tab. Princess. Oh yeah, I recognize the chin. Hard to miss when it is on every credit chip in the sector. Nix winked and slipped out, locking the door behind her. The silence that followed was sudden and heavy. Elias and Seraphine were alone in a room that was barely 6 feet wide. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, vibrating tension. Seraphine slid down the wall to sit on the mattress. She looked at her hands, still shaking slightly. That was exhilarating, she said, a breathless laugh escaping her, and terrifying. Elias checked the door, then turned to look at her. The gray dye on her face was streaked with sweat, revealing the luminous lilac skin underneath. Her merchant robes were torn at the hem. She looked nothing like the untouchable figure in the glass palace, and yet, she looked more regal than ever. You did good, Elias said, for a beginner. Seraphine looked up at him. Her eyes sparked with that dangerous playfulness again. She patted the empty space on the mattress beside her. The floor is wet. Elias, Sit down. I promise not to bite, unless that is part of the cultural consultant contract. Elias sat, maintaining a respectful distance, though in the cramped space, their knees were almost touching. Seraphine leaned forward, invading his personal space just enough to spike his heart rate. She reached out and brushed a piece of soot from his collar. "You saved my life on the roof," she murmured. Her voice dropped to that smoky register she had used in the dressing room. "Is this part of the service? The dashing rescue?" She was testing him again, using the familiar tool of seduction to regain control of a chaotic situation. Elias caught her hand gently but firmly, moving it away from his neck. "Seraphine," he said quietly, "you don't have to do that." "Do what?" "Play the siren. You are not on a stage. There are no cameras here. It is just us." Seraphine froze. The playful mask faltered. She pulled her hand back, curling her fingers into a fist. She looked away, staring at the rusting wall. "Habit," she admitted, her voice losing its melodic affectation. "It is the only weapon I was ever taught how to use. Charm them, distract them, make them want you so they forget to fear you. It is a good weapon," Elias said, "but you don't need to use it on me. I am already on your side." Seraphine looked back at him. Her expression softened, becoming open and vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen before. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you on my side, Elias? You could have walked away at the crash site. You could have turned me into the regent and collected a reward that would buy you a private moon. Why are you running through garbage chutes and getting shot at for a government that isn't even yours?" Elias leaned back against the cold metal wall. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I grew up on a colony called Oakhaven," he began. It was a small agricultural world on the fringe of the Terran Coalition. When I was 10, a radical faction took over. They didn't use fleets. They used data. He opened his eyes, staring at the flickering light strip. They seized the communication array for 3 years. They broadcasted nothing but manufactured reality. They told us the coalition had fallen. They told us we were the last survivors. They rewrote history books, edited news feeds, deep-faked execution videos of resistance leaders. Neighbors turned on neighbors because they were terrified. They believed the lie because it was the only thing they saw. Seraphine listened intently, her stillness absolute. It was a civil war fueled by fiction. Elias continued, "My father was killed by his own brother because a broadcast said he was a spy. When the coalition finally broke the blockade and restored the truth, it was too late. The colony was broken, not by bombs, but by the loss of shared reality." He looked at Seraphine. "I became a courier because I wanted to carry things that were real. Physical data, hard copies, things that couldn't be edited from a distance. When you showed me that map, when you told me about the Nemo Spire," he leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Your uncle isn't just building a weapon. He is building a cage for the mind. He wants to do to the galaxy what those warlords did to Oakhaven. I won't let that happen." Seraphine was silent for a long time. Then she reached out and took his hand. This time, there was no performance, no testing. It was just a grip of solidarity. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Elias said. "Just help me stop him." "I will," she vowed. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. The physical closeness of the small room felt different now. It wasn't claustrophobic, it was anchoring. The lock on the door beeped, and Nix kicked it open, carrying a bag of steaming food pouches. "I hope I am not interrupting a tragic backstory moment," she drawled, tossing the bag to Elias. But we have a schedule, and you two look like you need calories. Elias and Seraphine broke apart, though neither looked embarrassed. The bond was forged. "What is the plan?" Elias asked, tearing open a ration pack. "There is a masquerade ball tonight at the Gilded Heights," Nick said, chewing on a protein bar. "The Obsidian Gavel is holding the auction there. It is a holographic masquerade. Everyone wears hard light masks. Perfect for two fugitives who need to crash a party." Seraphine sat up straighter. "A masquerade. I can do masquerades." "We are not going to dance," Nix warned. "We are going to steal." I tracked the data node for the auction. The auctioneer carries the master encryption key on his person. If we get close enough, I can scrape the drive. "And if we get caught?" Seraphine asked. "Then we jump off the floating city and hope gravity is in a good mood." Nix grinned. The Gilded Heights was a shock to the senses after the grime of the lower levels. It was a platform of crystal and polished chrome, floating above the smog layer where the starlight could actually reach it. The masquerade was a swirling chaos of light. Guests wore masks projected by collars around their necks, shifting faces of dragons, nebulas, and abstract geometry. Seraphine and Elias moved through the crowd. Seraphine wore a mask of shifting storm clouds, while Elias wore a simple visage of polished obsidian. They moved in sync, stepping through the waltz of the galaxy's elite. "There," Seraphine whispered, her voice modulated by the mask. The auctioneer, the tall one with the mask of a golden sun. He was standing near a private booth, surrounded by guards. "I need 2 minutes." Nix's voice crackled in their earpieces. She was perched on a ventilation rig above the ballroom. "Get close. Keep him busy." Seraphine took Elias's arm. "Follow my lead." She swept him onto the dance floor, maneuvering them closer to the auctioneer. As they spun, she bumped into a waiter, sending a tray of crystal flutes crashing to the floor. The commotion drew eyes. The auctioneer turned. In the confusion, Seraphine stumbled, falling directly into the auctioneer's path. He reached out to steady her. "So clumsy of me," she cried, her hand resting briefly on his chest, right over the data port in his vest. "That is it," Nix whispered. "Uploading. Almost there. Got it." Seraphine pulled away, bowing apologetically. "Thank you, sir. 1,000 pardons." She grabbed Elias, and they melted back into the crowd. "We have the data," Nix said. "Meet me at the extraction point, South Docking Spire." They hurried toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut. The music stopped. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Secure the exits. We have a breach." The Regent's Seekers had arrived. They weren't wearing masks. They were wearing combat armor. "Run!" Elias shouted. They bolted for the kitchen service doors. Laser fire erupted, shattering the ice sculptures and sending the crowd into a panic. They sprinted through the kitchens, dodging terrified chefs and flying crockery. They burst out onto the landing pad where Nix was hovering in a stolen, sleek, angular ship that looked like a jagged knife blade. The side hatch was open. "Get in! Get in!" she screamed. Elias threw Seraphine on board and dove in after her. The ship lurched upward before the hatch was even closed. Plasma fire pinged off the hull as Nix punched the thrusters. "Strap in!" Nix yelled. "I am plotting a micro-jump to clear the system's mass shadow." "Micro-jump?" Seraphine turned pale. "Wait, The stars outside the viewport stretched into long lines of light. The ship shuddered violently as it tore a hole in physics. The jump lasted 3 seconds. When they reverted to real space, they were deep in the void, far from Kairos. Seraphine unbuckled her harness, scrambled to a waste bin in the corner, and violently emptied her stomach. Elias watched her, concerned. "Are you all right?" Seraphine groaned, lifting her head. She looked miserable. Her eyes were watering. I hate micro-jumps, she wheezed. The inertial dampeners never catch up to my inner ear. Elias couldn't help it. He smiled. It was such a human, unregal problem to have. Here, he said, handing her a bottle of water. Sip it slowly. Seraphine took it, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Stop smiling. Vance, it is treason to mock the royal digestion. I wouldn't dream of it, Elias said, though his eyes were twinkling. Nyx spun her chair around from the cockpit. Well, while Her Highness is reacquainting herself with her breakfast, you might want to look at this. She pulled up the data they had stolen on the main screen. It was a schematic of the Nemo Spire, but it was annotated with the Regent's personal notes. Phase 1, extraction complete. Elias read, Phase 2, installation at Unity Summit Podium. Phase 3, initiation of Harmony Rite. He scrolled down. The text was chilling. Target all attending delegates. Effect, permanent synaptic realignment. Loyalty parameters set to Imperial Throne. He is going to brainwash them live on the broadcast, Seraphine whispered, the nausea forgotten. The entire leadership of the galaxy will be standing on that stage. We have to stop him, Elias said. We can't, Nyx said. Not with this ship, and not without proof that the Spire is actually a weapon. Right now, it just looks like a fancy statue. Seraphine pointed to a set of coordinates at the bottom of the file. Origin point, Stormglass Expanse, she read. That is where they found it. If we go there, Elias said, maybe we can find the manual, the original purpose, something that proves he is perverting it. The Stormglass Expanse. Nyx grimaced. That is a navigational nightmare. Asteroid fields, ion storms, time distortion. Can you fly it? Seraphine asked. Nyx cracked her knuckles. Princess, I can fly a toaster through a black hole if the pay is right. Then set a course, Seraphine said. We are going to the source. As the ship banked toward the uncharted coordinates, Elias looked at Seraphine. She was pale, disheveled, and smelled faintly of sick, but her jaw was set in a line of iron. Are you ready for this? He asked softly. She looked at him, and for a moment, the weight of the galaxy seemed to lift from her shoulders. With you? She said. Yes. She took a sip of water and grimaced. Just warn me before the next jump, please. Elias laughed. I promise. They sat together in the dim light of the cockpit, two fugitives and a mechanic, racing toward the edge of the known map, bound by a secret that could save the world or end it. The Stormglass Expanse did not look like space. It looked like the inside of a shattered diamond. Nyx fought the controls of the stolen stealth runner, her cybernetic fingers blurring over the haptic interface. The view outside the cockpit was a kaleidoscope of violence. Millions of crystalline asteroids, some as small as a fist, others the size of cities, drifted in a dense, grinding nebula. They were not rock. They were translucent, refracting the light of distant stars into blinding ribbons of violet and jagged white. The sensors are gone, Nyx announced, her voice tight. The radiation from these crystals is scrambling the navigation computer. It thinks we are in 3 places at once. Also, the chronometer is running backward. Elias Vance gripped the back of the pilot's seat. Backward? Time dilation, Seraphine said. She was standing by the viewport, staring out at the glittering chaos. The ancient texts mentioned it. The stormglass distorts perception. We could be in here for 10 minutes and lose 10 days in the real world. Or the opposite. We need to find the coordinates fast, Elias said. Before we fly into a rock we did not see coming. Nyx deactivated the flight assist. I am flying visual. Old school. Keep your eyes peeled for anything that looks like a temple and not just another jagged death trap. The ship weaved through the field. The silence of the vacuum was replaced by the phantom groaning of the hull as gravitational shears tugged at them. It was a graveyard of light. Elias felt a strange pressure behind his eyes, a headache that whispered, "There!" Seraphine pointed. Ahead of them, a massive asteroid rotated slowly against the flow of the field. It was perfectly spherical, unlike the jagged shards around it. Its surface was smooth, dark glass, reflecting the nebula like a black mirror. A single geometric fissure glowed with a faint, pulsing amber light near the equator. The hollow asteroid, Elias breathed. Nix aligned the ship with the fissure. "I am taking us in. Hold on to something solid." They slipped through the crack in the asteroid's armor. The transition was jarring. One moment they were in the blinding glare of the expanse, and the next they were in a cavernous interior space, lit by bioluminescent moss that clung to carved pillars of obsidian. Nick set the ship down on a landing pad that had not been touched in 1,000 years. Dust billowed up, swirling in the low gravity. Atmosphere is breathable. Nix checked the readings, but it is thin and cold. They descended the ramp, weapons drawn. The temple was built into the inner curve of the asteroid shell. It was a masterpiece of impossible architecture, with walkways that spiraled upside down and archways that seemed to lead into infinite loops. The air hummed with a low frequency that vibrated in their teeth. "This place is alive," Seraphine whispered. As they stepped onto the main causeway, the temple woke up. It did not attack with lasers or drones. The defense was the architecture itself. The floor beneath Elias's feet shifted, the stone tiles rearranging themselves like a puzzle box. Walls slid out of the shadows, blocking their path. "Movement," Elias warned. Shadows detached themselves from the pillars. They were not biological. They were constructs of hard light and dust, vaguely humanoid but featureless. They did not attack. They stood, watching, blocking the path to the central sanctum. "They are guardians," Seraphine said. She holstered her blaster. "They are waiting for authorization." She stepped forward, raising her hand. "I am Princess Seraphine of the Illyrian throne. I claim right of entry by bloodline." The constructs did not move. The hum grew louder, shifting pitch into a discordant shriek. "Bloodline means nothing here," Nix muttered, her hand hovering over her heavy pistol. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the temple attacked. But it did not strike their bodies. It struck their minds. Elias fell to his knees as the world dissolved. The temple vanished. He was standing in a corridor on Oakhaven, the colony of his childhood. The walls were gray durasteel, lined with propaganda posters smiling down with dead eyes. He was holding a sealed envelope. He knew what was inside. It was a death warrant for a man he admired, a resistance leader. A voice spoke from the speakers, a voice that sounded like his own but twisted. "You are just the courier. Elias, you do not write the message. You do not read the message. You just carry it. You are a tool, a pair of hands. If you drop the letter, you are nothing." He looked down at his hands. They were made of paper. They were crumbling. "Elias." Someone called his name, but he could not answer. He was sealed shut. He was just an envelope. Seraphine was not in the temple. She was in the throne room of the imperial palace. But it was wrong. The windows were bricked up. The air was stale. She was sitting on the throne, wearing the heavy, silver-threaded ceremonial armor. It was so heavy she could not move. Her arms were pinned to the armrests by golden chains. Below her, a sea of faceless courtiers clapped in perfect unison. "Smile," the regent's voice whispered in her ear. "That is all you are for." Child, you are the pretty face we paint on the tank. You are the signature on the execution order. You do not choose. She tried to scream, but her mouth was sewn shut with gold wire. A man stepped forward from the crowd. It was Elias, but his eyes were blank, glassy. He bowed mechanically. I love you because I was ordered to, the hollow Elias said. I love the symbol, not the woman. Seraphine's heart hammered against the lead lining of her dress. This was her truth. This was the fear she buried under sarcasm and reckless flying, that she was not a person. She was a prop. Give in, the temple whispered. Accept your role. There is peace in the script. No choices, no pain. Elias fought the paper, crushing his lungs. He remembered the feeling of the envelope in his hand. He remembered the day he had burned it instead of delivering it. No, he croaked. The paper hand stiffened. I am not the message, Elias said, his voice gaining strength in the illusion. I am the one who chooses where it goes. He ripped the envelope in half. The gray corridor of Oakhaven shattered like glass. He was back in the temple. He looked over. Seraphine was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, her hands clawing at her mouth as if trying to rip out stitches that weren't there. Seraphine! Elias shouted. He scrambled toward her, but a wall of hard light slammed down between them. Through the translucent barrier, he saw her staring at nothing, paralyzed by the vision. Nyx was yelling something, firing her weapon at the shadows, but Elias ignored her. He pressed his hand against the barrier. Seraphine, listen to me. It is a lie. Inside the nightmare. Seraphine heard a distant shout. It cracked the silence of the throne room. You do not choose, the regent whispered. I do, Seraphine thought, the gold wire on her lips stretched. She looked at the hollow Elias in front of her. You are not him, she said. The real one would never bow. She focused on the memory of the wardrobe, the moment she had asked him to unclasp the armor, the moment he had stood back, giving her space, giving her agency. I am not a prop, she snarled. She ripped her arms up, shattering the golden chains. The sound was like a thunderclap. She stood up from the throne, and the heavy armor dissolved into smoke. I choose, she screamed. The throne room exploded into light. Seraphine gasped, falling forward onto the cold stone floor of the temple. The light wall vanished. Elias was there instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. Are you back? He asked, gripping her shoulders. Seraphine looked at him. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers trembling. You are real, she whispered. I am real, Elias confirmed. The discordant shriek of the temple faded into a harmonious, resonant hum. The hard light guardians dissolved. The path to the inner sanctum opened. The temple accepts the answer, Nyx said, lowering her gun. She looked shaken. Whatever it showed you too. I am glad I am a cyborg. My logic processors just gave me a loop error and rebooted. They walked into the core chamber. It was a vast spherical room lined with millions of data crystals. In the center, suspended in a gravity field, floated the Nemo spire. It was not a weapon. It was beautiful. A spire of white marble and circuitry, pulsing with a gentle rhythmic light that felt like a heartbeat. Seraphine approached the control console. It was designed for a hand shape that was not human, nor Illyrian, but she understood the interface intuitively. The data flowed into her mind, not as commands, but as feelings. It is a hospital, she said softly. Reading the streams of light, the ancients, they built this to heal. She tapped a glyph, and a holographic projection filled the air. It showed a civilization tearing itself apart with war. And then, individuals stepping into the spire's influence. They were not brainwashed. They were weeping. They were letting go of grief. It requires consent, Elias realized, looking at the schematics. Look at the neural handshake protocols. The subject has to open their mind voluntarily. It is a therapy device. It helps you process trauma that is too heavy to carry alone. And my uncle wants to force it open, Seraphine said, her voice turning cold. He wants to reverse the polarity. Instead of taking pain out, he wants to shove obedience in. She reached into the console mechanism. Here, she said. She pulled out a device. It looked like a lattice of woven diamond, intricately carved. The key lattice. Nix identified it. The administrative override. This proves the original design, Seraphine said, holding it up to the light. If we plug this into the spire during the summit, it will reject the Regent's forced protocol. It will show everyone what he is trying to do. We have the gun, Elias said. Now we just need to get it to the trial. They turned to leave, but the emotional aftershocks of the trial were still vibrating in the air. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them raw. We need a minute, Seraphine said suddenly. Nix, prep the ship. Nix looked at them, then nodded. Do not take too long. That time dilation is still ticking. Nix walked away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Elias and Seraphine stood alone in the glow of the ancient healing machine. The aurora of the storm glass expanse filtered through the ceiling, casting shifting veils of green and violet light over them. Seraphine leaned against the console, clutching the key lattice to her chest. She looked tired. The regal mask was completely gone. I saw myself, she said quietly. In the vision, I was perfect, and I was dead inside. Elias moved closer, but he didn't touch her. He let her bridge the gap. It was just a fear. Seraphine. It wasn't the future, it felt like the future, she admitted. She looked up at him. Elias. I have been trained since birth to be a symbol, to be the face on the coin. I am terrified that if I stop performing, there will be nothing left underneath, that I am just hollow. You are not hollow, Elias said firmly. The woman who flew a skiff through a forest, who jumped onto a moving tram, who laughed at motion sickness, that is not a symbol. That is you. Seraphine looked at him, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. I want things, she whispered, and that scares me. Because a princess is not supposed to want. She is supposed to serve. What do you want? Elias asked. Seraphine took a breath. It was a jagged sound. I want to not be afraid, she said. I want to wake up and not check the surveillance logs. I want to choose who I stand next to. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The key lattice pressed against his chest as she looked up at him. I want this, she murmured. But I do not know how to ask for it without making it a command. I do not know how to be. Just a woman asking a man. Elias reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. You just did, he said softly. He did not pull her in. He stood his ground, a steady, immovable point in her chaotic universe. He waited. Seraphine looked at his lips, then up to his eyes. She saw no hunger for conquest there. She saw only patience. He wasn't trying to possess the princess. He was waiting for Seraphine. She made the choice. She leaned in, rising on her toes, and pressed her lips to his. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of an action movie. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a question and an answer all at once. Her lips were soft, and she tasted of the sweet hydration salts from the ration packs. Elias responded with a gentle intensity, his hand moving to the small of her back, not to hold her captive, but to steady her. For a moment, the war, the regent, and the galaxy outside ceased to exist. There was only the hum of the spire and the warmth of skin against skin. Seraphine pulled back just an inch, her forehead resting against his. She was breathing hard, her golden eyes wide and luminous. That was... She started, but words failed her. Real. Elias finished for her. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that lit up the dim chamber. Yes. Real. The moment was shattered by a deafening boom. The temple shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Nyx's voice crackled over their comms, screaming, "We have company! Breaching charges at the main entrance!" Elias and Seraphine sprang apart, the soldier and the leader snapping back into place instantly. "The Regent?" Seraphine asked, grabbing her blaster. "Worse," Nyx yelled. "It is the Shadow Guard, his personal strike team. They must have followed our ion trail through the distortion. Run!" Elias commanded. They sprinted out of the core chamber, rushing back into the labyrinth of the temple. The sound of heavy boots and plasma fire echoed from the main causeway. "We can't go back the way we came," Elias shouted. "They will have the landing pad locked down." "The mirrored corridors," Seraphine directed. "Take the left fork." They dove into a hallway lined with polished obsidian mirrors. The reflection was perfect, creating an infinite visual loop. As they ran, their reflections multiplied into an army of ghosts. Ahead of them, 5 armored figures materialized from the gloom. The Shadow Guard. They wore matte black armor that absorbed the light. "There!" one of them shouted. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, shattering the mirrors. The hallway exploded into a storm of glass shards. "Keep moving!" Seraphine fired back, her shots wild. The mirrors made aiming impossible. Elias saw a guard on his left and fired, only to watch a mirror on his right shatter. The reflection had fooled him. "They are everywhere!" he yelled. "Trust your hearing, not your eyes," Seraphine shouted. They slid around a corner, scrambling up a gravity ramp that twisted 90 degrees. They were running on the wall now. The guards were confused by the shifting architecture, their heavy armor slowing them down. "Nyx!" Elias shouted into his comms. "Where are you?" "I am bringing the ship around to the secondary ventilation shaft," Nyx replied. "But I can't land. The defense turrets are active. We are coming out at the upper spire," Seraphine yelled. "Be there!" They burst out of the temple's upper exit, a narrow balcony overlooking the vast, terrifying drop of the interior cavern. The ship was hovering 50 feet away, swaying violently in the turbulence. Nyx had the side hatch open. "Jump!" she screamed. It was too far. The gap was impossible. Behind them, the Shadow Guard burst onto the balcony. "Surrender, Princess!" the lead guard roared, leveling a heavy cannon. Seraphine looked at the gap. She looked at Elias. She grabbed his hand. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "Always," Elias said. She didn't jump toward the ship. She shot the gravity stabilizer on the balcony floor. The platform collapsed. They fell. As they plummeted, the artificial gravity of the asteroid caught them, flinging them in a parabolic arc. It was a calculated risk. They swung underneath the ship. Nyx slammed the controls. She dipped the ship, catching them in the open cargo bay like a scoop. They hit the deck hard, rolling to a stop. "Go! Go! Go!" Elias screamed, scrambling to hit the door seal. The Shadow Guard fired from the balcony above. A rocket struck the ship's port engine. The vessel shuddered, alarm screaming. "We are hit," Nyx yelled. "The stealth core is destabilizing. If it blows, we are dead." "Eject it," Seraphine shouted, pulling herself up. "If I eject it, They will see us on every sensor from here to Illyria, Nyx argued. If you don't eject it, we vaporize. Nyx cursed and slammed a red lever. With a pneumatic hiss, the stealth core unit jettisoned from the rear of the ship. It tumbled away into the darkness of the cavern. 3 seconds later, it detonated. The explosion was blinding. A shockwave of pure energy slammed into the pursuing Shadow Guard, collapsing the balcony and burying them under tons of rock. The force of the blast kicked their ship forward, shooting them out of the fissure and back into the storm-glass expanse. They tumbled through the asteroid field, the ship spinning wildly. Nyx fought the yoke, her cybernetic arms straining against the G-force. Stabilizing, she gritted out. Engines are at 30%, but we are moving. They cleared the asteroid belt, streaking away into deep space. Silence fell over the cockpit. The only sound was the groaning of the stressed metal and the heavy breathing of the 3 survivors. Elias checked the key lattice. It was safe in his pocket. We got it, he said. Seraphine slumped into the co-pilot seat. We made it. Nyx tapped the communication console. Her face fell. Bad news. Folks, what? Seraphine asked. That explosion fried our long-range comms, Nyx said. The encryption module is toast. We are dark. We can't call your allies. We can't broadcast the evidence. So we are on our own? Elias asked. Completely, Nyx said. And now that we blew up a stealth core, the Regent knows exactly where we were. He will have every fleet in the sector looking for a ship with a limping engine. Seraphine looked out at the stars. The tender moment in the temple felt like a lifetime ago. The war was back on. Then we run, she said, her voice hard. We run all the way to the summit, and we deliver this key by hand. She looked at Elias. He nodded. By hand, he agreed. The ship limped into the black, a tiny spark of rebellion carrying the truth, hunted by an empire that wanted to forget. The stealth runner, now battered and minus its primary cloaking core, drifted in the magnetic shadow of a derelict freighter on the edge of the Imperial core systems. Inside, the lighting was dim, conserving power for the life support scrubbers. The air was stale, recycled one too many times, but the atmosphere in the cockpit was far more suffocating than the carbon dioxide levels. Nyx sat at the comm station, her cybernetic eyes glowing a faint, angry red as she scrolled through the public news feeds of Illyria Prime. It is bad, she muttered, flicking a holographic screen toward the center of the room. It is really bad. Seraphine stood with her arms crossed, watching the projection. Her face was illuminated by the flickering blue light of the broadcast. The image on the screen was a distorted, high-contrast photo of her and Elias running from the auction house on Kairos. The headline screamed in jagged, aggressive font, "The Puppet Princess and Her Human Master." The Regent had not wasted time. The narrative was efficient and brutal. He had painted Seraphine not as a villain, but as a victim, a weak-willed girl seduced and mentally compromised by a Terran infiltrator. Look at this, Nyx said, swiping to a video feed. It was a compilation of the viral audio clip. Want to see more? Unclasp it. But it had been remixed. The context of the heavy armor was gone. Instead, the audio was overlaid with grainy faked footage of Elias whispering into her ear, his eyes glowing with sinister digital effects. The implication was clear. The unclasping was not about freedom. It was about surrendering her dignity, her crown, and her biology to a foreign agent. They are calling it the seduction protocol, Nyx spat. They are saying Elias used pheromones and hypnotic suggestion. They are saying you have no agency, princess, that you are just a doll he broke. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the floor. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "Turn it off," Elias said, his voice low. Seraphine did not look away. "No. Keep it on. I need to see the shape of the weapon he is using." Elias stood up abruptly, the metal chair screeching against the deck plates. He walked to the viewport, staring out at the debris field. "He is destroying you to get to me," Elias said. "He is stripping away your credibility so that when we stand up at the summit, no one will listen. They will just see a brainwashed girl parroting her handler." He turned to face her. The guilt in his eyes was a physical weight. "I should go," Elias said. Seraphine looked at him sharply. "Excuse me? If I disappear, the narrative falls apart?" Elias argued, stepping closer. "If I turn myself in, or if I just vanish into the outer rim, you can claim you escaped. You can say you fought off my influence. You can regain the trust of the High Council." "And what?" Seraphine asked, her voice dangerously calm. "I go back to the palace. I put the armor back on. I apologize for wanting to breathe. It gives you a chance to stop the spire," Elias said. "With me there, you have no chance. I am the poison in the well, Seraphine. Every time they see me standing next to you, they see your weakness." Seraphine crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. She did not touch him, but she stood close enough that he could feel the heat of her anger. "You are not the poison," she said. "You are the antidote." She pointed at the screen where the Regent's propaganda was still playing. "He wants me to deny you. He wants me to say it was all a trick. He wants me to admit that I am incapable of making my own choices when if I send you away, Elias, I am proving him right. I am admitting that I am just a child who needs to be managed." She took a breath, and her voice softened, losing the edge of command and finding the steel of conviction. "I chose you. I chose to trust you in the garden. I chose to run with you on Kairos. I chose to kiss you in the temple. No one else gets to rewrite that, not the Regent, and certainly not you." Elias looked at her. He saw the fear behind her eyes, the terrifying vulnerability of a woman who had never been allowed to own her own life, but he also saw a ferocious pride. "You are stubborn," he whispered. "I am a queen in waiting," she corrected. "We do not retreat. We flank." She turned back to Nix. "Nix, can you patch into the emergency broadcast frequency, the one used for solar flare warnings?" Nix cracked a grin, revealing her serrated teeth. "Princess, I can patch into the Regent's electric shaver if you give me 10 minutes. What do you want to broadcast?" Seraphine looked at the screen, at the scandalous memes and the twisted lies. "They want to talk about unclasping?" she said, a cold smile touching her lips. "Fine. Let us talk about it." 2 hours later, every hollow screen, data pad, and public transit monitor in the mid-rim flickered. The Regent's carefully curated newsfeed dissolved into static, replaced by a simple low-resolution video. It was Seraphine. She was not wearing a crown. She was not wearing armor. She was wearing a grease-stained flight suit, sitting in the dimly lit cockpit of a fugitive ship. She looked tired. Her hair was messy. She looked undeniably real. "Citizens of Illyria," she began. Her voice was not the projected melodic soprano of the court. It was her lower natural register. "You have heard the stories. You have heard that I am lost, that I am controlled, that I have surrendered my mind to a stranger." She leaned into the camera. "My uncle tells you that obedience is safety. He tells you that the only way to be secure is to lock yourself inside the walls he builds. He tells you that choice is dangerous." She held up the key lattice. It glinted in the cockpit light. "He is right. Choice is dangerous." It is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy to a man who wants to own you. She lowered the device. They laugh at me for a whispered phrase. They say I am loose. They say I am broken. But I ask you this. What are you wearing that is too heavy? What chains have been placed on you for your own good? She looked directly into the lens, her golden eyes burning. Peace that requires you to be silent is not peace. It is a prison. I have unclasped my armor. I have unclasped the lie that I am a symbol. I am Seraphine, and I am coming home to tear down the walls. The transmission cut to black. In the ship, Nyx let out a low whistle. That, she said, is going to sell a lot of t-shirts, and probably get us executed, but mostly the t-shirts. Elias watched Seraphine as the recording ended. She slumped slightly in her chair, the adrenaline fading. You just declared war on the entire cultural establishment, Elias said. Seraphine rubbed her temples. I know. It felt necessary. She looked at him. Did I sound crazy? You sounded like a leader, Elias said. The dynamic on the ship shifted after the broadcast. The tension of the chase remained, but the interpersonal anxiety evaporated. Seraphine had drawn a line in the sand. She was not hiding her connection to Elias. She was weaponizing it as proof of her autonomy. Late that night, while Nyx slept in the engineering bay, Elias and Seraphine sat on the floor of the cargo hold. They were sharing a heated pouch of military-grade nutrient paste. It tasted like wet cardboard and copper. This is a crime against cuisine, Seraphine noted, taking a grimace-inducing bite. If I become Empress, my first decree will be to ban flavorless gray sludge. Elias laughed softly. In the colony, we used to trade 3 packs of this for 1 real apple. The black market for fruit was cutthroat. Seraphine passed the pouch to him. Her fingers brushed his. Tell me about the apple, she said. Not the war. Just the apple. Elias smiled, leaning his head back against the bulkhead. It was small, bruised on one side, but it smelled like rain and sugar. I shared it with my sister. We ate it slowly, slicing it so thin you could see through the pieces. It was the best thing I ever tasted. Seraphine watched him. The longing in his voice wasn't for the food, it was for the simplicity. I never had a bruised apple, she admitted softly. Everything on my plate was polished, perfect, checked for poison. I think I would like a bruised one. It sounds honest. She shifted, resting her head on his shoulder. It was a casual intimacy, born of exhaustion and trust. Elias stiffened for a second, then relaxed, his arm coming up to wrap around her shoulders. When this is over, Elias said, his voice rumbling in his chest, I will find you the ugliest, most delicious apple in the galaxy. I will hold you to that courier, she murmured. They sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the ship the only sound. There was no need for grand declarations. The broadcast had been the declaration. This, the quiet warmth, the shared terrible food, the breathing in sync, was the reality. Nyx burst into the cargo hold the next morning, clutching a data pad and looking manic. Wake up, lovebirds, she shouted, kicking a crate. I found the money trail. Elias and Seraphine scrambled up, disentangling themselves from where they had fallen asleep against the wall. What money? Elias rubbed his face. The spire, Nyx said, throwing the pad to him. Excavating a city-sized mind control device isn't cheap. The Regent has been burning through the treasury for months, but the imperial accounts are dry. So I started digging into the shadow ledgers. She tapped the screen. He is not just using tax credits. He is being funded. Massive, off-book injections of capital. Trillions of credits. From who? Seraphine asked, straightening her flight suit. The Vraxian cartel, Nix said. Seraphine went pale. The Vraxians, they are arms dealers, slavers. They raid the border worlds. Exactly, Nix said. And look at the repayment terms. The Regent didn't take a loan. He signed a concession treaty. Elias read the scrolling text. In exchange for funding the Spire's activation, the Regent has agreed to cede mining rights to the entire Outer Rim to the Vraxian cartel. And he halted. And what? Seraphine asked. And immunity. Elias finished. Full legal immunity for Vraxian slaving operations within Imperial space. Seraphine's face twisted in disgust. He is selling his own people. He is turning the Empire into a hunting ground to pay for his crown. This is it, Elias said. The key lattice proves the Spire is a weapon. But this proves he is a traitor. The High Council might fear the Regent, but they hate the Vraxians. If we show them this, he loses the military. We need the original file, Seraphine said. This data scan is just a shadow. It won't hold up in court. We need the verified biometric signature on the contract. Nix pulled up a star map. The transaction was archived in the Silent Vault. It is a secure data satellite orbiting the gas giant Othris. It is fully automated. No crew. Just droids and ice. Can we break in? Elias asked. Nix smirked. It is a bank vault in space. Of course we can break in, but getting out might be the hard part. The Silent Vault was a monolith of black metal, spinning silently in the rings of Othris. It looked like a tombstone. Nix docked the stealth runner on the maintenance umbilicus. They floated into the airlock in zero gravity. Seraphine moved with surprising grace, pushing off the walls, while Elias struggled to orient himself. Magnetic boots on, Nix commanded over the comms. Or you will float into a cooling fan and turn into confetti. They engaged their boots, clanking onto the metal grating of the satellite's interior. The temperature was freezing. Frost coated every surface. The central server is in the core, Nix said, consulting her wrist comp. 3 decks down. They moved quickly. The station was eerie. Droids with spider-like limbs skittered along the ceiling, ignoring them as long as they didn't touch the server racks. They reached the central terminal. It was a massive column of blue light. I need 5 minutes to slice the encryption, Nix said, plugging a data spike into the console. Watch the door. Elias and Seraphine took up positions at the entrance to the server room. The silence of the station was heavy. It is too quiet, Elias murmured. As if on cue, the airlock door at the far end of the corridor hissed open. Voices echoed down the hall. Assure the Regent that the backup is secure. We are scrubbing the local cache now. Seraphine froze. I know that voice, she whispered. That is Lord Malachar, the Regent's spy master. They weren't alone. A squad of 3 men turned the corner, floating in zero-G harnesses. They weren't combat troops. They were technicians and intelligence officers. But they were armed. Malachar stopped, his eyes widening as he saw Seraphine. Princess? He gasped. He reached for the alarm panel on the wall. Stop him! Seraphine shouted. Elias raised his blaster, but he hesitated. Malachar was a civilian official, not a soldier. In that second of hesitation, Malachar hit the alarm. Sirens began to wail. The spider droids on the ceiling stopped their maintenance and turned their red optical sensors toward the intruders. Protocol breach, a mechanical voice intoned. Sterilization initiated. The droids dropped from the ceiling, their welding torches igniting with blue flame. Nix! Elias yelled, firing at a droid that lunged for them. Almost there! Nix screamed, her fingers flying. Malachar and his men took cover behind a server rack, pulling small holdout pistols. Princess! Malachar shouted. Surrender! We know the human is forcing you. We can help you. Elias ducked as a plasma bolt scorched the wall next to his head. He looked at Seraphine. They won't shoot you, Elias realized. They think you are a hostage, but they will kill me, and they will kill Nyx. Seraphine looked at the tactical situation. The droids were closing in. Malakar's men had them pinned. They needed a distraction. They needed Malakar to hesitate. She looked at Elias. Her eyes were filled with sudden, sharp pain. "Forgive me," she whispered. She stood up, stepping out from behind cover. She holstered her weapon. "Stop," she commanded, her voice ringing with the full authority of the throne. The firing stopped. The droids hovered, confused by the royal voice authorization. Malakar peeked out. "Highness?" Seraphine walked toward him, leaving Elias behind. She pointed a shaking finger back at Elias. "He has the detonator," she lied, her voice trembling with a perfect mix of fear and fury. "He rigged the server to blow. He dragged me here to destroy the evidence." Elias stared at her. He understood what she was doing. She was playing the role. She was giving Malakar exactly what he expected to see. Malakar looked from Seraphine to Elias. "Is this true?" "He is a monster," Seraphine screamed, tears real and hot in her eyes. "Get me away from him. I never wanted this. He forced me." She looked back at Elias, and for a second, the mask slipped. He saw the devastation in her eyes. She was ripping her own heart out to save him. "I hate you!" she screamed at Elias. "I wish I had never unclasped anything for you. You are nothing but a dirty, lying human." Malakar signaled his men. "Secure the princess! Shoot the human!" The distraction worked. Malakar's men rushed forward to grab Seraphine, ignoring their cover. "Got it!" Nyx yelled. She yanked the data spike. The room plunged into darkness as she killed the main power. "Now!" Nyx shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. He activated the flashbang grenade on his belt and threw it into the center of the room. The explosion of white light blinded everyone. "Move!" Elias roared. He grabbed Seraphine as Malakar stumbled back. Blinded, Nyx fired her thrusters, grabbing Elias's belt. They launched themselves down the corridor, bouncing off the walls in the zero-G darkness. They scrambled back to the airlock, droids swarming behind them. They tumbled into the ship, and Nyx blew the docking clamps before the door was even fully sealed. The stealth runner shot away from the station, dodging the automated defense turrets that woke up too late. They were safe. They had the data. But the silence in the cockpit was deafening. Seraphine unbuckled her harness and immediately walked to the back of the ship into the small engineering bay. She closed the door. Elias looked at Nyx. Nyx didn't make a joke. She just nodded toward the back. "Go fix it," she said softly. Elias walked to the engineering bay. He opened the door. Seraphine was standing in the corner, her forehead pressed against the cold metal hull. She was shaking. "Seraphine?" Elias said gently. She turned around. Her face was wet with tears. She looked like she had been physically beaten. "I had to," she sobbed. "I had to make them believe it." "I know," Elias said, stepping inside. "It felt like poison." She gasped. "Saying those things, looking at you and seeing the hurt in your eyes, it felt like I was killing us. Like I was killing the only real thing I have." She slid down the wall, burying her face in her hands. "I am just a liar, Elias. That is all I am good for. I am a performer." Elias knelt in front of her. He gently pulled her hands away from her face. "You are a strategist," he said firmly. "You saved our lives." "He hated me," she whispered. "Malakar." He looked at me with pity. "Pity is worse than hate." Elias took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. The world is full of scripts. People want you to read the lines they wrote for you. Tonight, you used their script to burn down their theater. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You are not a liar, Seraphine. You are a woman protecting what matters. And what you said back there, that wasn't you. That was the armor. Seraphine leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I was so afraid you would believe me, she admitted. That you would think I meant it. Elias smiled sadly. I know the difference between the princess and Seraphine. The princess shouts. Seraphine whispers. He leaned his forehead against hers. Love is not another chain. Seraphine, it is not a performance review. It is a place you can still breathe. Even when the air is gone, even when you have to lie to the whole universe, you can always breathe here. Seraphine let out a long, shuddering breath. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him close, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder. I am tired of performing, she murmured. One more show, Elias promised, holding her tight, just one more. The Unity Summit. We walk in there, we play the video, we plug in the key, and then the curtain comes down. Forever? Forever. She held on to him for a long time, letting his steady heartbeat ground her. The cold vacuum of space was just outside the hull, but in the small engineering bay, it was warm. They returned to the cockpit an hour later. They were composed, their eyes were dry. Nyx looked up from her console. We have the records, she said, her voice businesslike. Signed by the regent, countersigned by the Vraxian warlord. It is damning. And the key lattice? Seraphine asked. Ready to interface, Nyx confirmed. Elias looked at the star map. The Unity Summit was taking place on the orbital platform above Illyria Prime in 2 days. We have the evidence, Elias said. We have the truth. Seraphine looked at the projection of the capital. Then let us go start a revolution, she said. She sat in the co-pilot seat and strapped in. She didn't look back. She looked forward, her hand resting briefly on Elias's arm before she grabbed the controls. Take us home. Nyx. The ship banked hard, engines flaring blue, and jumped into hyperspace, carrying the storm that would break the Empire. The Unity Summit was a masterpiece of political theater designed to mask the end of free will. The grand orbital platform, a sprawling disk of white marble and transparent aluminum, hovered in the upper atmosphere of Illyria Prime. Above, the void of space was visible, star-dusted and infinite. Below, the curve of the planet glowed with the soft luminescence of the capital city. To the thousands of delegates gathered in the levitating amphitheaters, the scene was breathtaking. Choir drones painted in gold and silver drifted through the air like schools of mechanical fish, broadcasting a harmonic hum that vibrated in the chest. Luminous banners unfurled from gravity generators, displaying the sigil of the summit. 2 hands clasping a star. It looked like peace. It smelled like expensive ozone and floral perfumes. But to Elias Vance, standing in the shadowed recess of the tertiary viewing deck, it smelled like a cage. He tugged at the collar of his disguise. He was dressed as a mid-level logistics officer for a terraforming guild, a uniform Nyx had fabricated in the ship's fabricator 3 hours ago. The fabric was itchy, but it got him through the perimeter scanners. His hand brushed the pocket of his tunic. Inside was a broadcast node, a redundant transmitter linked to Nyx's ship, which was currently clamped to the underside of the platform like a barnacle, hidden by the station's own heat exhaust. Elias scanned the stage. It was a massive circular dais in the center of the amphitheater. And there, rising from the floor like a spear of crystalline light, was the Nemo Spire. The regent had not hidden it. He had gilded it. He had wrapped the ancient, terrifying mind control device in decorative filigree and called it the Monument of Concord. It pulsed with a low, rhythmic thrum that synced with the choir drones. The crowd hushed as the trumpets blared. The regent emerged from the main archway. He wore robes of blinding white, embroidered with crushed diamonds. He looked every inch the benevolent savior. Beside him, flanked by 4 members of the Shadow Guard, walked Seraphine. Elias felt his breath hitch. She was not wearing the travel-stained flight suit from their escape. She had been forced back into the ceremonial armor of the court. The silver thread shimmered under the stage lights, stiff and heavy. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, intricate braid woven with pearls. She looked like a statue. She looked defeated. It was exactly what the regent wanted the galaxy to see. The prodigal daughter, returned and humbled, ready to kneel. But Elias knew better. He watched her hands. They were not clasped in prayer. They were loose at her sides, her fingers flexing rhythmically. She was counting. The regent stepped to the podium. His voice was amplified by the station's acoustics, booming yet warm. "Delegates of the galaxy," he began, spreading his arms. "We stand today at the threshold of a new era. For too long, our worlds have been divided by mistrust, by history, by pain." He gestured to the spire behind him. "We have unearthed a miracle, a legacy of our ancestors. This is not a machine. It is a bridge, a device that can harmonize our thoughts, remove the jagged edges of our aggression, and allow us to finally understand one another." He turned to Seraphine. He placed a hand on her shoulder. It looked paternal, but Elias saw the weight of the grip. It was a threat. "My niece, the Princess Seraphine, has seen the error of her rebellion," the regent said smoothly. "She was led astray by confusion and foreign deceit, but she has returned to us. She has returned to be the first to undergo the harmony rite, to show you that there is nothing to fear." The crowd murmured. There was tension in the air. The viral broadcast Seraphine had made, the Unclasp speech, was still fresh in their minds. They were waiting to see if she would break. The regent leaned in, his voice dropping so only the microphones caught it, intimate and chilling. "Seraphine, step forward, accept the peace." Seraphine stepped forward. She walked to the center of the stage, standing directly in front of the pulsing spire. The Shadow Guard stepped back, leaving her alone in the spotlight. She looked out at the sea of faces, thousands of aliens, humans, and Illyrians. Then, her eyes lifted. She scanned the tertiary deck. She found him. Across 200 yards of crowded amphitheater, their eyes locked. It was a connection stronger than any gravity tether. Elias nodded, a microscopic movement. "I am here. You are not alone." Seraphine's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. The tension of the statue vanished, replaced by the fluid readiness of the warrior. She took a breath. "Now." "Nix," she whispered. Deep in the station's ventilation shaft, Nix jammed a conductive rod into the primary power coupling for the stage lighting. The amphitheater plunged into darkness. The choir drones fell silent. The luminous banners flickered and died. The only light came from the stars above and the faint, eerie glow of the spire itself. Panic rippled through the crowd. Guards shouted. The blackout lasted only 10 seconds. It was a window Nix had bought with a surge of feedback loops. In that darkness, Seraphine moved. She didn't run. She stepped up to the microphone. When the emergency flood snapped on, washing the stage in harsh red light. Seraphine was not kneeling. She was standing tall, holding the key lattice high above her head. It glowed with a fierce blue inner light that cut through the gloom. "Do not accept this peace. Seraphine's voice rang out, unamplified at first, then booming as Nix hot-wired the audio system back online. The Regent spun around, his face a mask of shock. "Cut her, Mike!" he roared at the control booth. But Nix had locked the audio channels. Seraphine's voice filled the station. "This is not a bridge!" Seraphine shouted, pointing the key lattice at the spire. "This is a shackle." She slammed the key lattice into the interface port on the base of the spire. It was a violent motion, a physical reclamation of the device. The spire shuddered. The gentle white pulse turned jagged and red. A holographic projection erupted from the tip of the crystal, hovering over the terrified delegates. It was not a picture. It was a diagnostic scrolling in 3-foot-high letters of universal script. "System override detected. Coercion protocols active. Target, synaptic subjugation." The crowd gasped. The delegates in the front row scrambled back, overturning their chairs. "It is a lie," the Regent screamed, rushing toward her. "She has sabotaged it." Seraphine stood her ground. She didn't flinch as the massive man bore down on her. "Look at the code," she challenged, her voice steady and commanding. "It is not designed to heal you. It is designed to rewrite you. It is a weapon found in the dark and polished to look like a savior." She turned to the cameras, to the millions watching across the sector. "My uncle dug this up to ensure he never loses a vote again. He calls it harmony. I call it slavery." The Regent grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the silver armor. "You traitorous little witch," he hissed, spittle flying. "I will have you executed right here." He looked at the Shadow Guard. "Kill her. Kill them both." The guards raised their rifles. Elias moved. He vaulted over the railing of the viewing deck, dropping 15 feet onto the VIP tier below. "No!" Elias shouted. He activated the broadcast node in his pocket. "Nix! Drop the files!" On every screen in the amphitheater, the massive banners, the personal data pads, even the decorative monitors on the walls, the image of the spire vanished. It was replaced by the financial records they had stolen from the Silent Vault. The document was undeniable. It showed the seal of the Regent next to the blood sigil of the Vraxian cartel. The terms were highlighted in bold red. Payment for Nemo Spire excavation. Perpetual mining rights to Outer Rim territories. Immunity for slaver operations granted. The silence in the hall was absolute. It was the silence of a world breaking. The Regent froze. He saw the document towering over him on the main screen. He saw his own signature selling his people to the most feared criminals in the galaxy. He let go of Seraphine's arm as if it were red-hot iron. "You sold us," a voice cried out from the delegation. It was the High Admiral of the Illyrian fleet. He stood up, his face purple with rage. "You sold the rim to the Vraxians?" "It is a fabrication," the Regent yelled, backing away. "A Terran trick." Nix's voice boomed over the speakers, dripping with sarcasm. "The biometric signature is 100% authentic. Your Highness, you really should have used an encrypted stylus." The Regent looked around. The delegates were not looking at him with reverence anymore. They were looking at him with predator eyes. The illusion of his benevolent rule had not just cracked, it had shattered. "Guards!" the Regent shrieked, his voice cracking. "Arrest the human! Arrest the princess! They are terrorists!" The Shadow Guard hesitated. They looked at the screen. They looked at the High Admiral, who had his hand on his sidearm. Seraphine stepped forward. She looked at the captain of the Shadow Guard. "Captain," she said softly. Her voice was not amplified, but in the silence, it carried. "You swore an oath to the throne, not to the man sitting on it, but to the people it protects." She gestured to the screen behind her. Is that protection? Selling our citizens to slavers to pay for a mind control machine? The captain looked at the regent. He looked at Seraphine. He looked at the spire, which was still flashing the red warning, coercion protocols. Slowly, deliberately, the captain lowered his rifle. He turned his back on Seraphine and faced the regent. "Stand down, sir," the captain said. The regent's eyes went wide. "Mutiny? You dare?" "I dare," the captain said. Chaos erupted. The delegates began to shout, demanding answers, demanding justice. The palace security forces began to move in, but not to arrest Seraphine. They were securing the exits. Elias pushed through the crowd, jumping the barrier to the stage. He ran to Seraphine. "Are you all right?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. Seraphine looked at him. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving against the heavy armor. Her eyes were bright with adrenaline and triumph. "We did it," she whispered. "They know." Elias looked at the crowd. It was a riot in slow motion. The regent's power base was dissolving in real time. "It is not over," Elias warned. "Look." The regent was not surrendering. He was backing away toward the rear of the stage, toward the maintenance access door that led to the spire's internal mechanics. His face was twisted into a rictus of hate. "If I cannot rule this galaxy," he snarled, pulling a remote detonator from his robes, "then no one will remember it." He is going for the manual override, Seraphine realized, horror dawning on her face. He is going to overload the core. He will wipe the memory of everyone on this station. Maybe the whole city below. "Stop him!" the High Admiral shouted, drawing his weapon. The regent slammed his hand onto a panel by the door. A blast shield slammed down, separating him from the stage. "He is sealing himself in with the core," Nix shouted over the comms. "He has initiated a cascading overload. You have 5 minutes before that crystal turns into a psychic nuke." Seraphine looked at the blast shield. It was impregnable. "We have to go after him," she said. "How?" Elias asked. "That is military-grade durasteel." Seraphine looked at the key lattice still plugged into the base of the spire. "The spire is connected to the core," she said. "The maintenance tunnels." She turned to the crowd, raising her hands. "Get out!" she shouted. "Everyone evacuate the platform. Go!" The panic finally broke. The delegates stampeded toward the shuttles. Seraphine grabbed Elias's hand. "We are going into the machine," she said. They ran toward the base of the spire. There was a service hatch, barely large enough for a person. Seraphine ripped the cover off with a strength born of desperation. "Nix, guide us," she ordered. "I am trying," Nix yelled. "The radiation inside that thing is spiking. It is going to get weird in there." "Weird is better than dead," Elias said. He looked at Seraphine. "After you, princess." They dove into the dark, humming throat of the spire, chasing a madman into the heart of a machine that could erase the world. The inside of the platform was a nightmare of gravity wells and spinning gears. The regent had fled deep into the restricted wing, the sector that housed the spire's massive power capacitors. Elias and Seraphine sprinted down a catwalk suspended over a chasm of blue energy. The air tasted of metal. "He is ahead." Elias pointed. The regent was scrambling up a ladder toward the central control node. He looked disheveled, his expensive robes torn, his crown askew. He was muttering to himself, a mantra of denial. "They will not take it from me. They will not take it." "Regent!" Seraphine shouted. "Stop!" The regent stopped on the ladder. He looked down at them. His eyes were gone, replaced by the blank, terrifying stare of a man who had broken with reality. "Seraphine," he said, his voice strangely calm. "You ruined the ceremony. That was very rude." "Uncle, listen to me," Seraphine pleaded, stepping onto the ladder's base. "The overload will kill you too." "I am the state," The Regent smiled. I am eternal. If I reset them, if I wipe the slate clean, we can start over. I can teach you properly this time. No human pets, no rebellion, just peace. He resumed climbing. He is insane, Elias said. He is actually going to do it. He reached the top of the ladder. A massive console overlooked the pulsating heart of the spire. The crystal here was raw, jagged, and blindingly bright. The Regent began punching commands into the console. The hum of the spire rose to a shriek. The catwalk began to vibrate violently. Nix! Elias shouted into his comms. Can you lock him out? I can't, Nix screamed. He has physically severed the network uplink. He is hardwiring the command. Elias looked at Seraphine. We have to rush him. He has the high ground, Seraphine said, and he is armed. The Regent pulled a disruptor pistol from his belt. He waved it vaguely in their direction while his other hand kept typing. Stay back, children. Class is almost in session. Seraphine looked at the environment. They were surrounded by the massive coolant pipes that kept the spire from melting down. Elias, she whispered, the coolant pressure. Elias followed her gaze. A manual release valve was 5 feet away. If we blow that, steam will blind him, Elias said. And it will boil us if we are not careful. Seraphine added. On 3, Elias said. 1, 2, 3. Elias lunged for the valve, spinning the wheel with all his strength. Seraphine dove behind a support strut. A jet of superheated cryo steam exploded from the pipe, shooting upward toward the control platform. The Regent screamed as the white cloud enveloped him. He fired blindly into the mist, the disruptor bolts pinging harmlessly off the metal grating. Now! Seraphine yelled. She scrambled up the ladder, moving by memory and instinct. She held her breath, squeezing her eyes shut against the heat. She reached the top platform and tackled the Regent. They crashed into the console. The Regent was strong, fueled by madness. He struck her across the face with the pistol, splitting her lip. You ungrateful brat, he roared, pinning her against the railing. I made you! Seraphine kicked out, catching him in the knee. He staggered back. You made a doll, she spat, wiping blood from her mouth. I broke it! Elias reached the top. He didn't have a weapon drawn. He needed his hands. He grabbed the Regent from behind, locking his arms. Shut it down. Seraphine. Elias yelled, struggling to hold the thrashing man. Seraphine scrambled to the console. The screen was flashing critical mass. The countdown showed 30 seconds. I don't know the code, she screamed. He changed the abort sequence. Use the key, Elias shouted, grunting as the Regent elbowed him in the ribs. The lattice. Seraphine patted her belt. It was gone. I dropped it. She looked down. The key lattice was lying on the mesh grating of the catwalk below, where she had fallen during the tackle. Go get it, Elias yelled. I can hold him. Seraphine looked at Elias. The Regent was foaming at the mouth, trying to bite Elias's arm. She looked at the countdown. 20 seconds. She vaulted over the railing, dropping back down to the lower level. She landed hard, rolling to grab the key. 10 seconds. She scrambled back up the ladder. Elias was losing his grip. The Regent had managed to turn the disruptor pistol inward, pressing it against Elias's side. Let me go, or I kill him. The Regent shrieked. Seraphine crested the platform. She held the key lattice like a dagger. 5 seconds. She didn't hesitate. She didn't negotiate. She lunged past the struggling men and jammed the key lattice directly into the central data core port of the console. Authorization override. The machine hummed. The countdown froze at 2 seconds. System resetting. Coercion protocols purged. The shrieking noise of the spire died instantly, replaced by a low musical chime. The red light faded to a soft, harmless blue. The Regent stared at the screen. The madness in his eyes flickered and died. replaced by a crushing clarity. "No," he whispered. He went limp in Elias's arms. He dropped the pistol. "It is gone," the regent murmured. "It is all gone." Elias released him, stepping back and kicking the pistol away. "It is over," Elias said. Seraphine stood at the console, her hand still gripping the key. She was shaking. She looked at her uncle. The regent slumped against the railing. He looked small. He looked old. "Why?" he asked her, his voice hollow. "Why choose chaos? We could have had order." Seraphine straightened her armor. She looked like the queen she was meant to be. "Order without choice is just a graveyard. Uncle," she said, "I chose life, even the messy parts." Footsteps clanged on the metal walkway below. The High Admiral and a squad of palace guards rushed into the chamber, weapons raised. "Secure the area," the Admiral shouted. They swarmed up the ladder. 2 guards grabbed the regent, hauling him to his feet. He didn't resist. He stared blankly at the spire, a king without a kingdom. The Admiral looked at Seraphine. He holstered his weapon and bowed low. "Your Highness," he said, "the platform is secure. The delegates are safe. Thank you." "Admiral," Seraphine said, "take him to the brig." As they dragged the regent away, Seraphine turned to Elias. The adrenaline was crashing now. Her knees buckled. Elias caught her. "I got you," he said. Seraphine buried her face in his chest. The smell of the steam and the ozone was overpowering, but underneath it, she could smell him, soap and sweat and something that smelled like safety. "We stopped it," she mumbled against his tunic. "We stopped it," Elias confirmed. Nix's voice crackled over the comms, sounding breathless. "Hey, not to interrupt the victory hug, but the news feeds are going nuclear. You two are currently trending on every planet in the sector. They are calling it the revolution of the clasps, which, honestly, sounds a bit like a dance craze, but we will take it." Seraphine laughed. It was a wet, choked sound, but it was real. She pulled back and looked at Elias. Her lip was swollen, her hair was a disaster, and her armor was scorched. "How do I look?" she asked. Elias smiled. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Like a woman who just saved the world," he said. Seraphine took a deep breath. "Good," she said, "because I think I have a lot of work to do." She took his hand. "Come on, courier. Let us go face the music." They walked out of the restricted wing together, hand in hand, stepping out of the shadows of the machine and into the light of a new, uncertain, and beautifully free empire. The chaos on the platform of the Unity Summit had barely settled when the ground beneath them gave a violent, sickening lurch. The blue light of the Nemo spire, which had softened into a dormant hum, suddenly spiked into a blinding, jagged violet. The palace guards who were hauling the regent away stumbled as gravity fluctuated wildly. In that split second of confusion, the regent did not look like a defeated old man. He looked like a cornered viper. He twisted his wrist, activating a concealed gravity displacement ring, a piece of forbidden tech that should have been in a museum. A pulse of distorted force threw the guards backward like ragdolls. With a howl of desperate laughter, the regent didn't run toward the shuttles. He threw himself backward, diving into the open maintenance hatch that Seraphine and Elias had just climbed out of. "He is going for the roots," Nix's voice screamed over the comms, static tearing at the signal. The console up there was just the interface. The actual cognitive drive is buried 3 miles down in the crust. If he manually breaches the dampeners, he won't just brainwash the city, he will wipe it. Seraphine didn't hesitate. She looked at Elias, her eyes wide with the realization that the victory lap had been premature. "He wants a clean slate," she said, her voice hard. He wants to erase us all. We have to follow him, Elias said, moving toward the hatch. It is a one-way trip, Seraphine warned. The gravity wells in the understructure are ancient. We might not be able to climb back up. Then we find another way out, Elias said, after we stop him. They jumped. The descent was not a fall. It was a slide through the intestines of a dying god. The understructure of the palace was a labyrinth of vertical transit tunnels, pneumatic tubes, and vast echoing cisterns that predated the empire itself. Seraphine and Elias tumbled through a gravity chute, the artificial field buffering their speed but doing nothing for the disorientation. Up became down. Left became a spiraling vortex of rusted metal and flashing warning lights. They burst out of the chute into a massive subterranean gallery. The air here was hot and smelled of ozone and ancient dust. The architecture was different, no longer the elegant glass of the surface, but heavy, brutalist stone and iron. There, Elias shouted. Ahead of them, the regent was sprinting across a suspended walkway that spanned a chasm of churning machinery. He was moving with the unnatural energy of madness, his torn robes flapping like broken wings. Seraphine drew her blaster, but the regent waved his hand, and the walkway behind him began to retract. Too slow. "Niece!" he shrieked, his voice echoing off the cavern walls. "You think you can stop history? I am writing the end." He disappeared through a massive blast door at the far end of the chamber. The door slammed shut, the heavy locking mechanism grinding into place. Seraphine holstered her weapon and ran to the edge of the gap. The walkway was gone. Between them and the door was a 100-foot drop into grinding gears. "Nyx!" Seraphine shouted. "Can you override the door?" "Negative," Nyx replied. "That is pre-unification tech. It is analog. No signal to hack. You have to open it physically." Elias scanned the room, his courier eyes, trained to find roots in the most impossible urban sprawls, locked onto a series of pressure pipes running along the ceiling. "We don't need a walkway," he said. "We need momentum." He pointed to a hanging cargo chain. "If we swing across to that ventilation intake, we can bypass the door and drop into the antechamber." "It is a long jump," Seraphine noted, measuring the distance. "Trust the physics," Elias said, "and trust me." They backed up, synchronized their breathing, and ran. They leaped into the void, grabbing the heavy chain. Their weight swung it in a wide arc over the grinding machinery. At the apex of the swing, they let go. For a terrifying second, they were weightless. Then they crashed onto the metal grating of the ventilation intake, rolling to absorb the impact. They scrambled through the vent, kicking out the grate on the other side. They dropped into the core chamber. This was the heart of the world, a cavern so vast it had its own weather system. Clouds of steam drifted near the ceiling. In the center, the root of the Nemo spire descended from the rock above, a massive, inverted mountain of crystal that pulsed with a heartbeat of terrifying power. The regent stood at the base of the crystal, his hands deep inside an open maintenance panel. He was ripping out safety couplings, throwing them to the floor with manic glee. The hum of the spire was deafening here. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical pressure that vibrated in their teeth and bones. "Stop!" Seraphine yelled, leveling her weapon. The regent turned. He held up a bundle of fiber-optic cables. "Do you hear it?" he shouted over the roar of the machine. "The silence? It is coming. A grand forgetting. No more pain, no more rebellion, no more you." He is destabilizing the memory core, Elias realized, looking at the readouts on his wrist comp. He isn't trying to control minds anymore. He is trying to format the hard drive. If he cuts those cables, everyone in the capital wakes up with no name, no history, no loyalty, and he will be the only one who remembers. Seraphine said, He will be a god to a city of infants. She aimed her blaster at the crystal above the regent's head. I have to destroy it, she shouted. No! Elias grabbed her arm. If you shatter the core while it is active, the psychic backlash will lobotomize half the planet. You can't kill the machine to save the patient. Then what do we do? Seraphine screamed. He is seconds away. Elias looked at the key lattice, which Seraphine had hooked to her belt. The third path, Elias said, his voice cutting through the panic. We don't destroy it. We don't let him wipe it up. We lock it. We use the key lattice to fuse the safety protocols permanently, Elias explained rapidly. We turn it into a closed loop. It will never be able to broadcast a command signal again. But the internal therapy functions will survive. It becomes a library, not a weapon. But we need to plug it into the primary junction, Seraphine said, pointing to a slot on the far side of the crystal. And he is standing right in front of it. Then we move him, Elias said grimly. He didn't wait for a plan. Elias broke cover, sprinting toward the regent. The regent saw him coming. He dropped the cables and pulled a jagged shard of metal from the debris, brandishing it like a knife. Stay back, mongrel, the regent roared. Elias didn't slow down. He dove, tackling the regent around the waist. They slammed into the base of the crystal, grappling on the floor. Seraphine ran for the junction. The regent kicked Elias off, scrambling to his feet. He lunged for Seraphine. The metal shard aimed at her back. Elias caught his ankle. The regent fell hard, his face smashing into the floor plates. But he was possessed by a hysterical strength. He kicked backward, his boot connecting with Elias's temple. Elias saw stars, his vision blurring. He rolled, trying to regain his footing. The regent scrambled toward the open panel, reaching for the final severance cable. I will erase you, he shrieked. Seraphine reached the primary junction. She held the key lattice, but she looked back. Elias was on his knees, blood running down his face. The regent was inches away from the cable that would end history. She couldn't stop the regent and insert the key at the same time. Choice, she whispered. She didn't throw the key. She didn't shoot the regent. She threw herself between the regent and the panel. The regent's hand closed around her throat instead of the cable. He squeezed, his eyes bulging. Die, he screamed. Seraphine gasped, her vision tunneling. But she didn't fight his grip. She used his leverage. She jammed the key lattice into the port directly behind her, driving it home with the last of her strength. Authorize, she choked out. The spire screamed. A shockwave of pure white light exploded from the core. It didn't hurt. It felt like a sudden, deep breath after being underwater. The light passed through them. The regent froze. His grip on her throat loosened. He looked up at the crystal. The violent violet pulsing had stopped. The angry red of the overload was gone. The crystal turned a soft, dormant gray. The hum died. The storm broke. The regent fell back, staring at his hands. It is silent, he whispered. Why is it silent? Because nobody is listening to you anymore, Seraphine rasped, rubbing her bruised throat. The blast doors at the far end of the chamber groaned and hissed open. This time, it wasn't the regent's trick. It was the coalition. Dozens of soldiers, a mix of Imperial Guard and private security from the delegation, poured into the room. At their head was the High Admiral and a squad of medics. Secure the target, the Admiral barked. They swarmed the regent. He didn't fight. He just sat on the floor, weeping softly, mourning a power that had never really been his. Elias crawled over to Seraphine. He pulled her into a sitting position, checking her eyes, her neck. You are crazy, he said, his voice shaking. You used yourself as a shield. Seraphine managed a weak, crooked smile. I told you, she whispered. I am the corrective variable. Elias laughed, a sound of pure relief, and pulled her into a hug that squeezed the air out of her lungs. She held on just as tight. The aftermath was not a parade. It was a negotiation. 3 days later, the Grand Council chamber of the palace was packed. But for the first time in history, the doors were open to the public. Drones broadcast the proceedings to every corner of the empire. Seraphine stood before the throne. She was not sitting in it. The High Admiral held the crown, a heavy thing of starlight and gold. He stepped forward to place it on her head. Seraphine held up a hand. "No," she said. The chamber went silent. "I will not wear that," Seraphine stated, her voice clear and amplified. "Not yet, and not until it means something different." She turned to face the delegates. "My uncle proved that power without oversight is a disease. He tried to cure us of our free will because he thought it was messy. He was right. Free will is messy. It is difficult. It is loud." She looked at Elias, who was standing quietly in the gallery, dressed in a simple civilian suit. "But it is the only thing that makes us real." She turned back to the Admiral. "I decline the coronation. Instead, I demand the formation of a constitutional assembly. I want representatives from every species, every colony, and every trade guild. We will write a new charter, one that limits the power of this throne, not expands it." She pointed to the crown in his hands. "Put it in a museum. I will lead the transition council, but I will do it as a citizen, not a deity." The room erupted, not with polite applause, but with raucous, chaotic, hopeful noise. Nix leaned over the railing next to Elias. "She is good," Nix grunted. "She just fired herself from the easiest job in the galaxy and somehow made it look like a promotion." "She is building something that lasts," Elias said, watching Seraphine with pride. "Speaking of building," Nix said, tapping her datapad. "I sent the invoice for the ship repairs to the new council. I also added a line item for heroic services and general sarcasm." "Did you ask for a statue?" Elias asked, grinning. "I did." Nix nodded solemnity, bronze, 10 feet tall, with a plaque that says, "She saved your bacon." But I told them I would settle for a lifetime supply of high-grade capacitors and a pardon for all those smuggling charges. "They will probably give you the capacitors," Elias said. "I will take it." Nix shrugged. The sun was setting over Illyria Prime, but it didn't look like an ending. The twin suns cast a warm, peach-colored light over the spires of the capital. The smoke from the riots had cleared, and the city was glowing with thousands of lights as people celebrated in the streets. Seraphine stood on the private terrace of her old quarters. The armor was gone. The heavy robes were gone. She wore a simple evening gown of dark blue silk, loose and comfortable. She heard the door slide open behind her. She didn't turn. She knew the footfalls. "You are supposed to be at the victory banquet," she said softly. "The delegates are dying to meet the famous human infiltrator." Elias stepped up beside her, leaning his elbows on the railing. "I am not much for banquets," he said. "The food is usually too pretty to eat, and I promised someone I would find them an ugly apple." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, slightly misshapen fruit. It was red, with a brown spot on one side. He had bought it from a street vendor in the lower districts. Seraphine looked at it as if it were a diamond. She took it, smelling the skin. It smelled of rain and sugar. She took a bite. It crunched loudly in the quiet air. She closed her eyes, savoring the tart sweetness. "It is perfect," she whispered. She opened her eyes and looked at him. The tension of the chase, the weight of the crown, the fear of the spire, it was all gone. All that was left was the man who had seen her when she was invisible. "So," Elias said, looking out at the city, What happens now? You are the head of a transition council. I am a courier without a ship. Seraphine swallowed the bite of apple. We need ambassadors, she said. People who can travel to the outer rim. People who can explain that the empire is changing. People who know what it is like to survive a lie and fight for the truth. Are you offering me a job, Citizen Seraphine? Elias teased. Seraphine turned to face him fully. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm. I am offering you a choice, Elias. You can go back to the coalition. You can disappear. Or you can stay, she said. With me. Elias looked at her. He saw the golden eyes that had once terrified him, now filled with a vulnerability she only showed him. Is that a command? He asked softly. Never, she said. She stepped closer. The distance between them vanished. She reached up and touched the collar of his jacket. Elias covered her hand with his own. I am not going anywhere, he said. My ship crashed, remember? I am stuck here. Seraphine smiled. It was a soft, dangerous smile. The smile of the girl who had flown a skiff through a forest and jumped into a gravity well. Stuck, she mused. That sounds terrible. We should probably find you something to do. She reached for the clasp of her travel mantle, the heavy velvet cloak she had thrown over her shoulders against the evening chill. It was fastened with a complex, ornate brooch of silver and platinum. She looked up at him, her eyes dancing with the memory of their first meeting. But there was no performance now, no test, no manipulation. There was only an invitation between equals, a promise of a future that would be built, day by day, choice by choice. She leaned in, her voice a low, intimate murmur that belonged only to them. Want to see more? She whispered. Elias smiled, his heart full, his answer already written in the way he held her gaze. Unclasp it. Seraphine laughed, a bright, joyous sound that carried over the city. She undid the clasp. The heavy mantle fell to the floor, leaving them standing in the starlight, unburdened and free. They stood together on the edge of the new world, watching the nebula rise like a second dawn, ready to face whatever came next, not as princess and subject, but as partners in the beautiful, messy, and infinite adventure of freedom.